Good evening. The San Lorenzo River flows through the heart and history of Santa Cruz. Over the years, many concerned citizens have worked to increase the riverway's appeal to residents and visitors, and have urged civic leaders to develop a plan for appropriate use of the levees and the river environs. In 2003, the City of Santa Cruz and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers completed work on several projects along the river from Highway 1 to Monterey Bay. While the primary goal was increased flood protection to the 100-year-old floodplain, those projects served two additional city goals through the river: flow capacity to allow revegetation and habitat enhancement, and to create opportunities for reintegrating the city as a vital part of our community. The project improved the paved path system for pedestrians and cyclists along both sides of the river, and native trees, shrubs, and grasses were planted on the outside portions of the river levee. The San Lorenzo River Committee was appointed by the City Council in 2004 to oversee implementation of the San Lorenzo Urban River Plan. A three-member interpretive plan subcommittee was appointed to develop trail improvement programs to address specific needs for signage, wayfaring, interpretation, and trail linkages along the river. Many of the recommendations and suggestions about how best to accomplish these goals were included in a report published in 2007 entitled Ideas for Activation of the San Lorenzo Riverway. We'll be talking much more about that report and its findings during the course of our discussion this evening. I'm very pleased to have with me this evening to talk about this very exciting issue longtime San Lorenzo River advocate and former Mayor Bruce Van Allen. Bruce, welcome.
Thanks,
and
Steve.
Greg Pepping, the Executive Director of the Coastal Watershed. Greg, welcome.
Thank you.
I just have a little anecdote to start. When I first met Bruce, it was during a desal alternatives meeting early on, a couple of years back at Ecology Action, and the first thing that Bruce and I ever discussed was the San Lorenzo River and his vision for it and how he wanted to get a festival going. So this is a very appropriate extension for me and Bruce, of our relationship down through the years. Greg, tell us a little bit about your work first with the Coastal Watershed Council, and a little bit about yourself as well while we're here.
Well, the Coastal Watershed Council is a nonprofit. We've been around since 1995. We work throughout Monterey Bay on watershed protection. We preserve and protect coastal watersheds through education, stewardship, and monitoring. We train a lot of volunteers on how to follow protocols so that we get scientifically valid data about the health of rivers and find out where the water is clean or where it's dirty.
Right.
The other thing the Coastal Watershed Council does is we talk to students, we talk to landowners, and we talk to local leaders about how we can keep water clean. Where it's dirty, clean it up, and where it's clean, keep it that way. Pretty much everybody says they care about water, and we just try to put a positive solutions focus spin on that and give people an idea of what they can do on land to affect the water.
And I really appreciate your work. I've been a steward with Save Our Shores for about 5 years, and of course they work very closely with one another, so thank you for all of that work. Bruce, welcome, Mayor in 82 and then 83, I guess you're saying, and really a longtime advocate for the Riverway. And tell us a little bit about yourself and really how you became engaged in this particular issue, which you're so passionate about.
Well, thanks, Steve. And first of all, I just want to say thanks for having us on the show tonight. The river is really important to me, obviously, and I want to thank Charlie Phillips for inviting me tonight. He's powers this show in many ways, and I appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely.
I was first struck by the river when I moved here nearly 45 years ago, and how here it was a river running right through the center of a beautiful town with a community that really cares about the natural environment that surrounds the town, and yet the river was such a wasteland, and it seemed incongruous. It seemed I didn't get it, and it reminded me of the LA River, which is almost entirely concrete because of it being treated as a flood problem or as an engineering problem. And so over the years, I asked questions, and after I did time on the city council, in fact, 30 years ago, the city decided to, we had a near flood downtown in the great storm of 82. Got within about this close to having overtopping the levees downtown, and the Soquel Avenue Bridge partially collapsed, and so that led to a lot of discussion about both the flood danger, but also because some of us began speaking up about it, but what about the natural habitat of the river that we knew used to be there but was clearly gone? And through a lot of committees and meetings and things like that over the years, the city has come around to supporting the river with the idea of turning it from a problem area into an asset.
Right.
An asset for the environment, an asset for the downtown, for the residential areas that are near it, and for the commercial areas. And so that's just continued to be a passion for me. I expect I've got another couple decades probably to go on the river
At least,
to give.
yeah. Let's hope.
And what's really fun is that seeing work that people did years ago coming around and being really important to take the next steps for now.
Yeah.
And so the plan that you mentioned, the ideas for activating the riverway, has a bunch of things in it that are really current to what's up in Santa Cruz right now. And so I hope we get a chance to dig into that a
Well,
little
of
bit
course,
tonight.
and Bruce, you were kind enough to forward this on to Charlie and myself, and really to educate and inform this program about, talking and give us some, framework within which to, and anybody who's interested in this, really, this is a fascinating document which is still very vibrant and live today, and you can get this by downloading it off of the city's website, but really a terrific document, and one of which I was not aware, frankly, but when I went through it and started looking at all the things, the themes for interpretation, the orientation and wayfinding strategies, all of these things are really laid out in a way that I think really should be able to inform and guide us as we go along. Greg, your views about this in particular, that how it can inform and guide us through, and what do you see are the problem areas in really trying to make this happen?
Well, the Coastal Watershed Council went through a strategic planning process over the past year and really asked some challenging questions about how we can have more impact, how we can make water cleaner because of what we're doing, and realized that we really want to focus a lot of resources on one river. Not the only thing we do, but really focus, and we decided that would be the San Lorenzo River, and started refamiliarizing ourselves with these documents because there's been a lot of success, a lot of hard work has been put into the river. City and county staff are working hard on it every day, and state and federal agencies, neighborhood groups, but the river is not what it is in some other areas, in San Luis Obispo and in Redding and Sacramento and Paso Robles and San Antonio and Kansas City and San Antonio and on and on and on. Those areas have a thriving urban river, and we don't. And so while there is a lot of attention and there is some success, some implementation of this and other plans, a lot has not been done. And we realized the Coastal Watershed Council just thinks that the timing's right to revitalize that conversation, to put some renewed energy into that. And this is one of a variety of plans. It probably needs to have the opportunity for the community to add to it and maybe reprioritize what they like best out of this and some other plans, and some new ideas as well. And what we want to form, the Coastal Watershed Council wants to partner with the city and the county and some other nonprofits to form a public-private partnership to have some immediate progress so that people feel good about the river, and then also some mid and long-term funding strategies and a business plan of sorts so that we can really change it.
And as Bruce really is one of the framers of this document, and someone who probably knows as much about the potential of what we see in here, and the ideas, what are your ideas about how we're going to reactivate this plan?
Well, because the river is both a wild zone for wildlife and the habitat we want to put back, and also is right in the middle of the city, we have a kind of a balancing act of our various concerns and priorities. And so the big question in Santa Cruz today is, how do we get the river to be a place that, well, actually, let me start in a different way.
All right.
What we've found over the years is that when people care, when people do something to protect the environment, it's when they know about it and care about it. And so what those of us that want to bring the fish back to the river and want to have the river be a healthy ecological connection between the Monterey Bay and the Santa Cruz Mountains, which it used to be, we've concluded that what we need is for more people to have a sense of ownership and care and involvement in the river in order to be ready to help protect it and bring back the natural features. And so the ideas for activating the riverway, the whole point of that is to kind of re-knit the river into the social fabric of the downtown. That's the idea. Make it a safe space to be in, not a threatening space. Make it a place where, even though it's kind of a wild zone, it's not. That doesn't mean that it's lawless, that it's a place to go to commit crime or something like that. And unfortunately, it's a big area. It's 2.5 miles from Highway 1 to the river mouth, two sides, so that you've got 5 miles of levees. That's a big area. There's a lot going on along the river, and to make it a place where everyone feels comfortable and welcome and safe has got to be a top priority for the community.
And you said something before the show that struck me is that while we were thinking about how to kind of revitalize this the Riverway and bring people down to it, it is a wild zone in that people want to get away. You know, that's a place they go to be by themselves, with themselves, to appreciate the waterway, to appreciate nature, and they should be able to balance those things out, you know.
It could be an incredible thing right within our city. Just you know, if you go out to Westcliff, we have one of the most incredible things for urban life that you can get, which is that we can, in our own city, walk right out to the edge of the Pacific Ocean and watch waves crash against the cliffs right on a residential street. That's a very incredible thing. Very few people get to have that. And we could have the same thing with the river. It could be a beautiful area and a wonderful social space.
And this is a city-generated document, of course, but Greg, you were talking about city and countywide collaborations to get this done. You know, is something...
And public-private, I think you mentioned.
Public-private, is that something that really is possible? Is something that's being worked on? Is something being formulated now?
We're working on that. The Coastal Watershed Council is talking to the city, the county, and other nonprofits and neighborhood groups. It's worked elsewhere, and instead of recreating, redefining the wheel, we're looking at models of success elsewhere. Baltimore has a Healthy Harbor initiative that's worked really well. The Puget Sound Partnership, those are two models we're looking at. It's definitely possible. And the city's doing, I think the city deserves a lot of credit for what they are doing, and the county as well. It's a large watershed. But I think they need help. You know, I mean, it's not just government's job to do something and we say, okay, take care of it for us. But there's an opportunity for residents to get involved, and then we can really change. I mean, what Bruce is talking about, if we change the river, it'll substantially change Santa Cruz. It really will.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Bruce earlier about in my 2 unsuccessful runs for city council, it always struck me that here was this beautiful resource, this treasure, and yet we didn't have one river-facing business. We didn't have any lights along the path. We didn't have any coffee cart or a bathroom or something to draw and revitalize it, make it part, an extension of the downtown. That nothing was being done about this. And when I look back on the work that was done here in almost a decade ago, it makes me wonder why we haven't made more progress along the way.
Well, it's a tough thing. You know, it's not a life and death proposition like public safety is. It's not about how to get more cars from point A to point B like road building and bridge building is. It's hard to get the river and this combination of habitat and recreation and internal city transportation pathways and signage and all those kinds of things to rise to the high priority, given all the other things that local government has to try to do. So I can understand, but and what I think Greg and I would agree with is that this is the kind of thing where the community has to kind of periodically get active and push for it and ask for more.
And I want to ask you about
that's what we're trying to encourage now.
A recent example of that. I want to remind people that we are a live show. You can call us at 425-8844, 425-8844, and ask either one of our guests, a question that's you burning have to have the answer to. One of the things we were talking about earlier is the paddle boarding. That was just recently kind of a one-day event, to bring the kind of vibrancy to be able to use the river. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is something that Greg and the Watershed Council get credit for. For years, I think I served on 4 different river committees or task forces, and every one of those, somebody came to us at one point and said, hey, I'm a kayaker, why can't I kayak on the river? Or we have an outrigger club, why can't we row on the river? And every time what we had to say is, well, there's a city ordinance against that. And apparently the story behind that ordinance is that some kid was reckless in riding an inner tube during a storm flow in the river in the winter and drowned. And so the city, being afraid of liability, just banned it outright. That's the story. I don't even know if it's true or not. That's been the law. And over the years, we've kind of poked at it a bit, but finally, with the initiative of the Coastal Watershed Council and a bunch of local rowers and kayakers and paddlers and stand-up paddleboarders and stuff, and a sympathetic mayor, Mayor Hillary Bryant, we had this day where there was a chance to go out there and check it out. Greg can say more, but I want to address one piece of it that's been a big concern of mine, which is in the 80s and again in the around 1999 or 2000, when we were doing some of the habitat restoration studies, we asked the fisheries and bird biologists, what about boating on the river? Would that be okay?
And you're talking about motorized boating?
Well, we were just talking about any kind of activity. Would that, what effect would that have? Would that be damaging to habitat values and so on? And what they said is that non-motorized human-powered boating, so no fuels, no big churning of the water from a motorized thing, that would not be deleterious to the fish habitat value or to birds. Since then, I've learned there would be a few constraints, such as the area above Water Street is an intensely vegetated zone that's very important for nesting habitat for birds during certain seasons. And so I think that has to be respected. And if there is a move to open up boating, there's got to be some constraints on it. But as long as it's not motorized, I'm fairly convinced that the damage to birds or fish is not a significant thing.
And that seems to be a question of balance between habitat conservation, of course, and public access, public use of the riverway. And I'm sure that's something the Watershed Council is very concerned about.
Right, and we want to get it right. One thing that I think it's worth pointing out is that on Tuesday at 7 o'clock at the City Council meeting, the Council is expected to direct staff to formally review the ordinance that Bruce was talking about.
Oh, okay. Wonderful.
And we don't want to just snap our fingers and then change this thing and not get it right. I mean, there probably is some analysis of liability and logistics and birding and permitting and other things. But we're really thankful that we have agreeable leadership and agreeable city staff so that they are going to look at the ordinance and see if we can change this. Let me talk a little bit about the pilot. We had a one-day pilot that Bruce mentioned.
Right, yeah.
And the city was agreeable.
I think everybody, and I noticed it.
It was really cool.
Incredible, yeah.
And the Coastal Watershed Council worked with the city manager's office, the water department, and got a one-day pass to kind of just a pilot to learn about, okay, is this a great idea or a bad idea? And I thought it would be neat, but it was so cool. We had 50 people on the water. We had one guy rowing, sculling, and then a bunch of canoes and kayaks and stand-up paddleboards. And I'm a water geek, and I bike a lot, so I am on the levee a fair amount, and I pay attention to the river. I thought it would be neat, but I was really struck by how cool it was, how big the river was to be in it, how natural it felt, how neat it was to see the city that I love from a different perspective. We had 50 people out there with permagrin for 3 hours.
And the river was large enough, wide enough surface area to accommodate everybody, and everybody enjoy the experience. And
That's great. And we went all the way down to the mouth. There was a big sandbar, so there's a lagoon at the mouth. And,
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Yeah.
And I think that to be able to realize these dreams, to make these things happen, we really do need enlightened leadership, and that's enlightened leadership not only in our city council, but in our board of supervisors and all electeds, across. So with the public-private partnerships that you're talking about, Bruce, you've been a long-time political person, operative in this area, a very successful one, in fact. Do you think we have that kind of enlightened leadership right now that's going to allow us to realize this dream?
Well, I guess what I would say is that this kind of thing always takes the community pushing for it. The status quo, it would be to do minimal maintenance on the river, treat it as a flood danger and a maintenance problem and a law enforcement problem, and kind of lock it down. And that would save money, and or at least in the short term, it would seem to save money. Boy, would that be a sad future for Santa Cruz. Let's not go that direction.
And I haven't been around town long enough to have to understand the rich political history that perhaps you do, and maybe even Greg. But I know that there was at one time a San Lorenzo River Commission that was allowed to sunset for some reason or other. Were you a part of that? And why was that allowed to sunset at a time when we really needed it the most?
Well, I think that was the 4th River Commission or task force I was on, and that sunsetted because of budget cuts. There were I don't remember how many, but several city committees and commissions involving the public in city processing and policymaking that were sunsetted because of budget cuts several years ago. it's unfortunate because these kinds of things need public participation. It can't be just relying on electing somebody and then trusting them to just go do it. It takes organizing in the
Well,
community.
and I do agree. Witness your and my involvement in the recent desal thing in town, where it was a grassroots movement. It wasn't necessarily civic leaders or even the will of those folks who were intent on building this particular desal plant. It was the people of Santa Cruz who said, we want to have a decision about whether or not we should build it at all. And so I think it's very true that those kinds of grassroots movements, the grassroots, kind of persuasion you can put on something like this is absolutely essential. But enough of why we can't do things. So what can we do? Where are we now? Let's talk about something positive and see what the future is going to hold for us.
Well, can I add something to what
Of
Bruce
course,
said about
yes.
the community pushing? The Coastal Watershed Council is trying to be very cooperative with the city because we're thankful that we have city council of those I've spoke to that like the idea of reconsidering this ordinance, and city staff are agreeable as well. So we're pretty lucky that we don't have to push. But I think Bruce is right that the council and staff and council both need to hear from the community. And what the Coastal Watershed Council is asking is that if you like the idea of this ordinance being reconsidered, if you like the idea of having that cool day we had as a regular thing, come to City Council on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And we're asking people to wear a life jacket, wear a PFD, and it'll be kind of
Everybody out there hear that?
a neat
Please,
visual.
say that again so people know exactly where to go and what to do and what to wear, because let's get some people out. Let's make this a vehicle for trying to get people out there to say something about this very important issue.
Right, it's Tuesday's City Council meeting, the 7 o'clock City Council meeting on Tuesday, and it's really a show of thank you for council to direct staff to formally review the ordinance that prevents paddling right now. And we're hoping that in the interim we can have maybe once a month paddling. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but wear your life jacket and it'll be a pretty neat visual to have council chamber full of people with PFDs. And imagine if you're on the city council, you look out there and you see a bunch of people wearing life jackets. Why are they wearing a life jacket? Because they want to get in the river. And it's back to what Bruce said about we take care of what we love and we can't love what we don't know. We really need to reconnect with this river. And paddling is one part of that. It's one of the first immediate, visible, low-hanging fruit steps we can take. And we're really hoping that happens soon. Okay,
so, Bruce, with the benefit of your experience, your years of advocacy, being one of the framers of this document, what does the future hold? What can we do? Where are we going with this?
Well, I look at it as immediate things that can happen soon, and some of them are already starting to come about, and then the longer term. And the longer term is going to take a continued push and public-private partnerships and probably building some kind of long-term trust fund for the river or something like that to keep improvements happening. In the short term, we just opened a sweet new bridge up by Highway 1. The pedestrian bike bridge is up there a couple years ago.
The Former Street Walking Bridge?
Yeah.
Lovely.
That bridge was first came about in a public participatory planning process in 1985.
Wow.
When we asked the community to come up with ideas for making the river better part of the downtown and the urban landscape. And that bridge came up a lot. And so we've been pushing for it for then. And so it took 25 years to get that bridge in place. And that, for me, was a very interesting lesson because some people know this from pretty left-wing politics. We want lots of change, soon. And this river has taught me a kind of patience, I guess I have to say, that it took 25 years to get a sweet little bridge built. And so I do take a kind of a long-term, I'm not giving up, so it's implacable forward movement. But in the meantime, that bridge did a very special thing, which is it made it possible to go around the entire loop of the river within downtown. And there are 2 more little bridges that are going to make that an even smoother trip. One of them that is coming soon is on the railroad trestle down by the river mouth. We're going to get a wider and more easily accessed bike and pedestrian bridge across the trestle there, and that's coming soon. That required the county to purchase the rail right away and funding to show up and things like that. That's coming. And then another one that's another couple years off probably is to continue the levee path under the Soquel Avenue and then over the Branciforte Creek channel, which comes in there. You know, right now, if you're coming up the levee path on the east side at Soquel, you have to get off by the Indian restaurant there and go out to Dakota
Oh, right,
Street,
of course,
Riverside, cross over to Dakota, and then get back in San Lorenzo Park to get back to the levee-way. Well, there's a plan now to have the levee go under the Soquel Bridge and then up, and then a bridge cross over Branciforte Creek right into the San Lorenzo Park. That makes an absolutely continuous loop where you can go without ever endangering yourself with automobile traffic. And so one of the things that I'm now encouraging is activities like races, and there's increasingly, if you're out there, you see fitness equipment and stuff like that, and mile markers, so that it becomes a recreation area. I'd love once again to see we had a human-powered sculpture vehicle race a few years ago, and having the bridges all done makes that a continuous loop. So there's a couple improvements like that are in the works, and those will be coming up mostly to city council meetings. That will be something to support. And then the other area, though, I think that's important to talk about, I know you're about to introduce something, is public safety.
Of course. Well, let's hold that thought.
Okay.
I really would like people to be able to see the rivers. We're talking about it in the abstract. We have a clip. There was actually a tour that you had led in 2006, I think, of the river. You'd be able to see yourself in there. If we could run that clip right now, then get people the flavor and the visual of the river, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little more about it.
Great.
Yeah. course, the beautiful treasure that is the San Lorenzo River. Greg, during the break, we were talking about the person you saw in there, of course, Bruce Van Allen, conducting the tour, and even then he had much to say, but a longtime advocate from the river is Bruce Van Allen.
And I just wanted to say that if you like this river and you live in this community, you owe Bruce Van Allen a thanks.
Yeah.
I've only lived here 5 years, and as this is a focus of the Coastal Watershed Council, the San Lorenzo River, we're putting a lot of resources into this. And the more people I talk to, the more it's very, very clear that everybody knows that Bruce has worked harder on this than anybody over the last 20 years, and it shows.
And even in my short history in town, I would agree, and it's only a couple of years back that Bruce and I met, over the San Lorenzo River, but everybody that asked me about, well, what about the San Lorenzo River? Is anybody doing anything about it? Who do I talk to? Bruce is the person I refer them to without hesitation, because his work over time has been nothing short of laudable. So we were going to talk about public safety, Bruce. That was the question that was coming up just before the clip. So,
well, this is a complicated area, and it's a big concern right now in Santa Cruz, and that is that there's a lot of general concern in the community about crime, about youth gangs, drug abuse, things like that. And what I was saying earlier about the river is kind of a wild zone within the city, and it's right in the center of the city, which means it touches a lot of neighborhoods and commercial areas and streets and tourist areas and so on. Into that wild zone go people doing drugs, prostitution, hiding after
regrettably
shoplifting,
so,
whatever it is. So there is an issue with crime. There's also rivers are places of refuge, just in all of human history. There's places where people go for safety. They travel along rivers, and our river is no different. And that means that people that don't have much in the way of resources, people that are poor, people that have lost their homes, often end up near the river. We're in a time in Santa Cruz, not unique, of a lot of backlash against poor people and against homeless people, against immigrants and so on. And that shows up in some very strong attitudes. But what I try to pay attention to in those negative attitudes is that there is something real about the fear that people feel. And so what I want to do now with the river is not lock it down, not have to have big bright lights every 50 feet and armed guards everywhere and stuff like that to make it quote unquote safe, but rather to think about what is a river in a urban context that is, it's a park, it's a natural habitat zone, it's also a transportation corridor for people walking and biking and on wheelchairs and bridges going across it. It's a place to go for beauty and quiet. And it has a number of facilities along it. It's got a world-class lawn bowling, a world-class skateboard park. It's got hockey courts. It's got paths that lead throughout the city. It's got incredible viewpoints to see the city and the surrounding area. It goes right next to a very successful downtown Santa Cruz. Some great neighborhoods are near the river. And yet, the river itself, the levees themselves, they get into that wild, darker zone, and people don't feel safe there. A lot of people don't feel safe there, and especially at night. And so this has to be addressed. And again, going back to the goal of having people know the river and like it and like being around it and caring about it. If it feels unsafe, that's not going to work. That's not going to be the case. And so it actually becomes an important goal for the sake of the fish and the habitat and the care that we need to come from the public for that we also have to have people feel good there and feel safe there. And so this is what I'm real interested in addressing.
And let me remind our viewers again that we are a call-in show of 425-8844, 425-8844. Interesting, we have a call, Michael from Aptos. Michael, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Question for my panelists.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to really encourage them with their efforts. We've known Bruce for a long time and haven't known Greg. But my main concern, I keep hearing the word wild. I come up on not making it just another stream through a concrete town. And it kind of hits in the face of what I see happening with the county right now, is that they're almost falling over backwards to put cell towers and telecommunication devices on everything they can. And I'm looking at one thing here where they want to remove any requirement for broadband infrastructure within the public right-of-way to obtain a discretionary land use permit. And, you know, if it goes in that direction, it's going, to me, the opposite of where they want it to go.
Mm-hmm. Response to that, either of you, Greg or Bruce?
I'm not quite sure I get how that connects with the river. The idea of being not allowing cell towers near the river. Maybe say a little more about that, caller.
Michael, you still with us?
Yeah.
Bruce had a question for you.
Yeah, I can barely hear you, so...
Oh, do you mean concern about things like cell towers being placed along the river?
Yes, I am, Bruce, because we're in a big fight right now with the county where the planning department and at least 4 of the 5 supervisors seem to be hell-bent on just doing everything they can to get Verizon, to get these different cell towers in around Santa Cruz County, almost envelop Santa Cruz County with them. And I would see that as extremely detrimental, especially if you're talking about a refuge for birds where the radio frequency emissions and so forth, I mean, there's so many studies that say they're detrimental to not only humans but wildlife, and to have that have to come in just seems to me to be the opposite of where you want to go.
Well, thank you, Michael. That is a realistic concern. We live in an age that is dominated by the information technology that we have, and the temptation to put up the communications devices anywhere you can to make it more efficient encroaches on almost everything, but should not on the riverway.
My own view is the precautionary principle, which is that if something could cause damage, you tend to decide not to do it unless you have an awfully good reason. Right. And I don't see a particular reason to add cell towers along the river.
Greg?
I don't know that much about cell towers, but from what I do know, it seems like they want to put them in high areas so they can get as much visibility or line of sight or broadcast signal. So I wouldn't expect them to be popular along the river, but Michael brings up a point that I think a lot of people will have as a concern is, if you talk about revitalizing this riverway, what does that mean? Does it mean a bunch of concrete right next to it? And are you talking about commercial development and all that? And hopefully not.
No.
But it will be a balancing act. It may be some stuff that you might not want to see there or that I might not want to see there. But there's so much more that can be done versus what is now. And I keep pointing to what is happening in so many other communities. And I just believe that Santa Cruz has enough imaginative problem solvers, enough creative people, we have enough resources.
No question about it.
It can be different.
Yeah,
so.
No question about it. And I think that a cautious approach certainly, is warranted. But I think that things, should be done that lead to more of a revitalization of the riverbank, riverway. Just if it's only to maybe light the paths, if it's only to, put a couple extra bathrooms out there, if it's only to draw the downtown out into the river levee. And I think, Bruce, one of the things that we talked about when I first met you was the San Lorenzo River Festival and things like that, to bring awareness to that. I mean, we're talking about public awareness. We're talking about, the public perception that, yes, this is something we want to include in our community. This is a treasure for us, Let's include it in our community. Let's include it in our daily lives.
Yeah. I was just thinking of when we were talking about a festival, one of the big components of a river festival in the past, when there have been festivals and in thinking about another one, is the arts community. And it reminds me of, there is a very sweet improvement that's been done to the river in the last couple of years that is not a big dramatic thing, but it's just one of the most wonderful things in Santa Cruz. And that is that if you've walked across any of the bridges on the river, if you look at the bases of the lamp posts that are on the river, on the bridges on the river, look closely and you'll see these delightful mosaics that have been placed of wildlife and flowers and things like that. Those are all done by local school kids under the leadership of one of the best teachers in the world, Kathleen Crocetti, a local art teacher, and I think some other teachers. They have now put those on almost all the light standards on every bridge across downtown. And that's, to me, that's like jewelry in the urban of the urban landscape. And I just love them for it. And it's the kind of thing where we keep putting in place little things like that, as well as some of the bigger changes that have to happen. That's what's going to transform the river into an incredible center of town.
Greg?
Steve, I just wanted to give a plug for Kathleen. She is going to be one of a number of presenters at an event that the Coastal Watershed Council is having at the Red on December 11th.
All
so
right.
Wednesday, December 11th at the Red downtown at 5:30. The theme is going to be the San Lorenzo River.
Ah, wonderful.
And it's called Pechacucha. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's
I'm familiar with Pachamama.
Pechacucha. There's always a joke about Pechacucha when someone brings it up. Pechacucha was brought.
We can't tell here, obviously.
No. About 10 years ago, because people go on and on and on in presentations,
Right.
at some architectural firm in Tokyo, they came up with this format: 20 slides, 20 seconds each, and they auto-advance. So it's a vibrant, fresh, demanding presentation style. And Pechacucha, we've had their international events around the world now. We've had 5 in Santa Cruz. This will be the 6th one, and there have been different themes. The theme of this one will be the San Lorenzo River, and Kathleen Crocetti will be one
And
of the
so
presenters.
again, this is, let the viewers know, this is Wednesday, December 11th.
At the Red downtown.
Right,
Okay, great.
and that's one of, we're hoping more and more and more events. That's not on the river, but events on the river and events about the river. The ones on the river, we hope to have yoga in the parks. There's a lot of CrossFit gyms in town. You could have CrossFit or other exercise. We're having a birding
Wonderful.
walking tour. History, food, paddling, as we mentioned, all other types of ideas, so that before you know it, people are saying, wow, I was actually down by the river like 3 times in the past couple months, and I wasn't down there at all in the past year. And Bruce mentioned how we want to make sure that this isn't, it doesn't need to be a police state. There's a fine line between making it feel
Well, I'm
safer.
certainly against that.
Right, and we are as well. And there's something called self-policing, and
Of
if we're
course,
all
yeah,
down there
yeah,
more,
of course.
hanging out, and
Yeah.
it's just a safer environment, then we don't have to have that type of just enforcement. It's more people doing wholesome activities, and people feel safe, and that kind of feeds on itself.
And Bruce's mention of the light standards and whatnot brings to mind Arana Gulch Watershed when they were thinking about building a path, and I guess maybe they're still thinking about building a path across the gulch. They were going to make it an interpretive path, so that all along, apparently, there is some information you get, much the same as you would get at the harbor, where you go out there in the various docks and they have you can see the seals and the gulls, things like that. Maybe that's one thing that we could do just out there to show people, to have this kind of interpretive, descriptions of what you see in the river. When you're walking along the path, what do you see in the river? What do you see that you don't see? How can we educate people and make it more interesting for them as they're walking along?
That's one of our goals, and it's actually in that Activating the Riverway plan.
There you go. Great minds.
Is an interpretive system that gives information about Santa Cruz history, as well as about the natural habitat and the wildlife that are coming back,
Right.
Current things. And I think that it'll become an educational resource as well as a attraction for visitors, and place where schools and university students can do projects, do
Yeah,
research
wonderful,
projects,
of course.
things like that.
And I know that that was one of the main headings in interpretive opportunities by River Reach. River Reach was that an organization? Or
No,
was that-
river reaches that's sections of the river. So
Okay.
a reach between Highway 1
Okay,
and Water
good.
Street.
All right.
And what this
Right.
plan does is divides it up into about 5 reaches, 5 stretches of river,
Okay.
and talks about improvements that can happen within each one, whether it's types of recreational facilities or improvements to signage or restrooms or whatever.
the improvements, the potential improvements distinct between each of the reaches?
They have different character,
Yeah.
yeah. So, for example,
certainly the river does,
as I mentioned earlier, the reach from Water Street to Highway 1, the vegetation is so rich there, and the water is fairly low, and so that makes it great nesting sites. And so that reach will have a theme that has more to do with observing wildlife than, say, human recreation. But other ones will have different themes. One thing we'll have to work out, assuming things go ahead the way we want, is where should there be little boat landings, little boat docks, which of course there used to be along the river. You know, one of the wonderful things in history, and it's that there's a map in that activating the Riverway plan done by.
And again, take a look at this. Can we get a shot of that from one of our cameras? Any one of them? Or Bruce can hold it up since they're focusing on Bruce. This is a wonderful document. Bruce, now we're back on Bruce. But anyway, a wonderful document downloaded on the city website. It's a visionary document, one that really people should familiarize themselves with. But go ahead, Bruce, please.
Sorry, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
No, the difference between the reaches and the things that do.
I mean, one of the things is that, again, as I said, it's 2.5 miles from Highway 1 all the way down to the river mouth. And so it goes through a lot of different parts of town and what the plan calls for. And as Greg mentioned, this is just a set of concepts that can be built on and new ideas can be added to it. So, but what it calls for in more of a general way is that we look at each section of river and find ways to make it richer, more inviting, safer, better lighted, whatever it is, so that things can happen there. More things can happen.
And as we attempt to move toward those dreams, those visions, I know that one of the sections in here was community engagement strategies. You know, I'm sure you both have community engagement strategies. You've talked about some of them. What are some of the other what we can engage the community, strategies to actually do that?
Well, something Greg and I have kicked around, we mentioned it a little while ago, and it's a future goal, is to do another river festival, which would involve science, local history, the arts, recreation, sports, and a lot of different sectors of the community in a weekend, and do it with enough time to plan it ahead and have a lot of involvement, and make it a place where there's a lot of people there doing something fun, doing something enriching with the river, and thereby caring more about it.
And one of the things that I recall from our first conversation again, where you were bemoaning the fact that this was really something you wanted to do, but it takes so much time and energy that you just didn't have the time and energy available to do it yourself. And so we really need to engage other members of the community in doing that.
And I mentioned that I want to give the city and county credit for what they're doing, the county up in the upper watershed and the city in the urban river. But it is about, you asked about engagement, and Bruce was talking about fun events, and we want to do that as well. The other thing that we want to give people is an opportunity to say what they don't want and what they do want and prioritize things. For example, the city got a grant recently, I was about to get a grant likely, for some lighting, and some folks would say that's going to be problematic for the birds. So that's a community conversation that we need to have. This is our river.
Right.
You mentioned Arana Gulch, Steve, and they had a groundbreaking just last week, the city did. And there's still some that don't want that to go through.
Of course,
you know, that's a challenging conversation that some people just have to respectfully disagree about.
Yes, indeed.
But that's what we want to have, is we want to foster that conversation so that we can have change that mostly we agree about and that is better for the community. And so it's the fun events, but it's also community dialogue to have events that...
And within that, of course, the political system being what it is, you have to have some mechanism that people will be able to provide their input.
And we're talking about the San Lorenzo River Alliance would be this public-private partnership. The city can't do it all. You mentioned the Urban River Committee that used to be city-staffed, and it's my understanding that the county did not have a lot of involvement in that in the past. And the city can do a lot, but there are limits on what the city can do as being the institution as they are. So if you had a JPA eventually, or maybe just a group that is operating under a memorandum of understanding.
Of course, yeah. I'm familiar
The
with
county, the city, the Coastal Watershed Council, the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, the San Lorenzo Valley Women's Club, the Museum for Natural History, the Resource Conservation District. Those are the likely parties, and some others to grow in time.
Right.
And to have a river oversight committee, and then you could have working groups focusing on everything you wanted to do, from water supply and that conversation, to flood protection, public safety, habitat, water quality. We've already started that one, focusing first on bacteria. Economic development, you mentioned a couple of times that those Front Street businesses face away. I mean, we talk about turning your back on the river, literally. We've turned our back on the river.
And that's the metaphor, that I've often used, But it's interesting that when we talk about this particular document or Run a Gulch, you're talking about the city taking a lead on this. And so I'm curious why the county hasn't taken more of a hand in being a partner in doing these things.
Well, I mean, in a way the county has, but it's the downtown river is within the city limits, and it's a city flood control project that built the levees and so on with the Corps of Engineers. And so that's pretty much a city responsibility. The upper watershed, though, the county has a San Lorenzo River Watershed Management Plan. It was actually first written in the 70s. It was one of the first watershed management plans anywhere in the United States, and modeled after some in England and some other countries. And it's one of those far-reaching visionary plans that unfortunately doesn't get much funding and doesn't have the staff time at the county to do a lot of what it calls for. But over the years, that watershed management plan has had an effect on reducing erosion, influencing land use policies up in the valley. You know, one of the things about the watershed, which is the area in the mountains where all the water collects from rainfall and coming out of the ground and collects into streams and tributaries to the river and eventually comes down to the lower river. That watershed has an extra layer of challenge because unlike a watershed, say in the Sierras, where if we just left it alone, it would recover its natural qualities and the water quality would come back after we got done logging or mining or whatever abuse we'd done to it, if we just left it alone. Well, here we have a heavily inhabited watershed. The San Lorenzo Valley has thousands of people living in it, working in it, driving in it, and that's what will be. That's not going to change for any substantial, any time soon. So having an inhabited watershed really adds to the complexity of it. And over time, the county has actually had a role in increasing the awareness and the consciousness, and therefore, again, the care that people in the San Lorenzo Valley have for the river. And I would say up there, river awareness is greater than it is down here in Santa Cruz, because they see it so vividly and they see the natural parts of it as well as the more
Greg,
urbanized
had something to add
parts.
to that?
Well, I think I just agree. It seems like the valley does identify more with the river, perhaps more than Santa Cruz City residents.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share my excitement that Bruce defined a watershed, because I think I never want to miss the opportunity to do that. It's in our name, and not that many of us know that the watershed is not the river. It is not the area right next to the river. It's all of the body of land that drains to the water. And the other thing I wanted to add on top of what Bruce said was, he mentioned funding. And not everything's about money, but if we have this San Lorenzo River Alliance that I'm talking about, this public-private partnership, imagine that you're a large private foundation or you're a state or federal agency, and those organizations have money, and you see this coalition of a regional effort to work on the river. We can bring more resources to this, and that is part of the problem. It's not the only thing, but a lack of resources is, of course, part of it.
And I have always had a particular interest and emphasis in my water politics on the watershed, because I do think that it is something that's not clearly understood. And I've always thought that one of the ways to ensure our future water sustainability would be the restoration of the watersheds that we have.
Absolutely.
And yet that really has been no focus on that whatever. In the few minutes that we have left, just kind of give us your call to action. From where we're sitting now, we're talking to some people. They're going to be downloading this wonderful document and taking a look at what things can be done, to activate the San Lorenzo Riverway and do that. What else would you suggest to people in terms of the community engagement that we're talking about?
I would say that I would like to ask people to think about places they've been where they have seen a thriving urban riverway. And most people have an example of some place they visited. And I just want to ask people to ask themselves, why not? To have that challenge question, why not here? And we have that opportunity here. And it doesn't have to be the way it is. You can donate money to this cause. You can give your ideas. You can influence policymakers. For example, Tuesday, 7 o'clock at City Council.
All right,
Those are a number of opportunities.
There. Yeah. Bruce, your call to action for our viewers and the community. Let's get this thing going.
Well, I'd say the same thing that Greg said, and support the Coastal Watershed Council, and come on down to the river. You know, it's a really great place. There's a lot of really nice places to walk or to ride a bike. Bring the family down. We have beautiful weather in Santa Cruz, and the river's a great place to enjoy that weather. And maybe watch for boating day to show up every month.
Is there going to be some plan for another?
Well, it's a proposal now, so we're hoping for it.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is one of those things that I think people always have in the back of their minds when they're walking along the river and they're looking at it and they're saying, you know, that's beautiful, it's a treasure, what can we do with it? Really, I appreciate all of your work, and I think Santa Cruz is really fortunate to have two advocates of your caliber, Greg and you, Bruce, to be able to put some of these proposals forward, because I think it's one thing to vision, you know, a treasure being restored to Santa Cruz and the community. It's another thing to make it actually happen. And as Bruce and I both know, and Greg perhaps as well, you know, politics is the art of the possible. So we have to look at what's possible. And this is something that's possible. Again, I would really urge people to take a look at this document and just kind of let it percolate through their minds about how they might be able to be engaged with that. And tell us one more time about the December 11 event.
December 11th is at the Red at 5:30. It's called
Okay.
Pechacucha. The focus will be on the San Lorenzo River, 10 creative presentations about the
Okay.
river
All
that
right.
I'm sure you'll be inspired and educated by.
And Bruce, any last announcements for folks who are interested in the river?
Like I said, come on down, enjoy the river.
Listen, thank you both for being here. It has been a very
Great.
great
Thank you,
pleasure.
Steve. Yeah.
Thank you to Charlie Phillips, our producer. Thanks to everybody in the engineering room and the people behind the cameras. And this is Steve Pleich thanking you for watching this program on Voices from the Village. Good night, and tune us in again.